let's get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
This is so awesome.
We are an open culture that believes in the importance of
What is that process that a developer, or let's say,
as the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed?
Greetings, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Did I miss any times of day? Welcome. You have joined the Level Up Hour, where we talk about all things containers, Kubernetes, and OpenShift. And today we are going to talk about something that's very much in the character of what we do on the Level Up Hour, and that's we're going to talk about how to learn more about OpenShift and how to develop your skills and deepen them and become a master of this particular area of the world. And so today I am joined by Nate Stephanie, who is the manager of OpenShift and Application Development Curriculum for Red Hat Training. Greeting, Nate.
Hi, Randy. How you doing?
Doing great. And I am also joined by my colleague in crime on the certification side, Henry Main, who is the manager of platform and cloud exam development. Good morning, Henry.
Good morning, Randy. How are you doing?
Doing great. And so, thank you for joining both of you, particularly Henry. Henry is on the U.S. Pacific coast, and therefore this is a very early start for Mr. Main.
I have been known to be up at this hour.
Yep. And Nate is joining us from lovely Berlin, Germany, where the heat continues, I take it, and you have actually beaten a retreat to the office.
I've been getting on my bicycle every day for the past 2 weeks to absorb some of the air conditioning in the office.
This is not what we meant by return to the office, right?
You do what you got to do.
All right. Well, so we're going to talk today about some of the resources that are available and how you can really up your skill. And the thing about it is we cover a lot of things sometimes on the Level Up Hour. The whole purpose being to level up. My co-host Jafar Sharibi is actually on holiday for this episode, and he's usually a reliable source of a deep dive into a great many subjects. Sometimes things that are tech previews, sometimes things that are not even in the tech preview stage and are simply, something that might be coming down the pike from the community. So with that in mind, today we are going to rewind it back to where do you even begin? And so, Nate, I'd like to start with you. I think we have actually some offerings available from Red Hat Training that are free, self-paced offerings that can help you get started. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, there's I think everyone goes down a slightly different journey on how to get started with OpenShift and Kubernetes in general. I personally started with this thing back in, I don't know, after the summer of 2015, so shortly after 3.0 launched. And boy, it was it was a different time then. The installation alone was a very fun topic. So yeah, we have some what is the SKU DO80 I think that exists out there, for instance, to get people started. But even beyond Red Hat Training content, there's other tools that people can easily use to get started. I often talk about the Openshift Sandbox that exists, where people can go and start exercising some basic use cases on how to use OpenShift, how to deploy a simple application, how to create your services and secrets and that type of thing. I know a lot of people use OpenShift Local, which used to be called Code Ready Containers, which used to be called something else before that. I can't remember.
Yeah.
And then of course there's trial clusters and things like that. But yeah, if you're looking for some self-paced guided exercises from Red Hat training, that DO80 course exists out there. And then some of the other materials that you can find, for instance, in the developer sandbox are what I would use to get started nowadays to at least dip the tip of the toe in the water.
Yep. And actually, there's one other thing that I would mention is that we actually have something with the very unlikely title of learn.openshift.com, and you might be shocked to learn that you actually learned some things about OpenShift there as well. Henry, what was it like? So you were put in the thankless position of having to create exams going back to I think our earliest OpenShift exam was on version 2.1. Is my memory?
Yes, it was, which was a completely different beast.
Yeah. So we associate OpenShift so closely today, of course, with Kubernetes and containers, but interestingly enough, OpenShift actually precedes both the use of containers and Kubernetes. So what was it using back then, just for a little bit of historical context?
That's almost further back than I can remember, but I do remember learning about this concept of something called a gear. And unfortunately, I don't remember much other than that because knowledge you don't need right away tends to evaporate. But it was a completely different product. Same idea, but I believe it even preceded the world of Docker and all of these other Docker and Podman and all of these other just very common tools that we just sort of take for granted, I think, in the world of OpenShift these days. It was a drastically different product.
I seem to remember cartridges also. That's like
Yes,
another term that
cartridges,
comes to
thank you.
mind
Yes.
whenever I think about OpenShift
Gears,
too. Yeah.
gears and cartridges, which I think were was the early incarnation of what we came to know and love as containers.
Yeah.
But it was still built around the concept of underlying everything was namespaces, which is the Linux technology that makes containers a thing.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, basically, SE Linux at its core is what we are using. But we are now, in fact, in this world of containers and Kubernetes, and that is what OpenShift has been for now these many years, and I think very effectively. And so, let's just kind of move past what we could maybe go out there and stumble upon to sort of the formal curriculum and certification paths that we actually offer within Red Hat. And I'm going to start at the 100 level, which in most universities, the 100 level is your basic level. Sometimes there might be some things leading up to 100, but and I think Nate mentioned DO80, but I think we also have something called a DO101.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay. And, DO101, as it suggests, is a fairly basic thing. But I think moving on, we get to, we have a DO180 course. And the DO180 course is, Red Hat OpenShift 1, Containers and Kubernetes. And Nate, could you maybe tell us a little bit about what the scope of that is?
Yeah, that really gets you into the introduction, right? So it's managing containers and images. It's creating those images. It's deploying those on OpenShift. It's some basic introduction to multi-container applications. But it's dipping the rest of the toe into the water from those freely accessible entry points.
Well, okay, so let's talk about the accessibility of those entry points. What does somebody need to know before they start diving into that content in that first OpenShift 1 course?
Yeah, the kind of going back to what Henry was talking about with the the introduction of what OpenShift 3 and beyond were built on. Like, you need to know what a container is. We will introduce you to some of those topics in the course, but you would be well served to come in being familiar with the existence of these containers that everyone's very excited about nowadays. I think it's good to know some basic Linux, for instance. Not everything is a GUI, especially as you move into more advanced topics. So certainly being familiar with, even if it's not Linux, command line tools, since we do offer Windows versions of those. And lastly, knowing something about some of the public cloud services and offerings, would serve you well. In addition to those things, as you start dipping your toe into the water. But the basics of Kube and containers, basics of Kubernetes and containers, knowing a little bit about those will give you a head start on the 180 type courses.
Okay, Henry, what are your thoughts? If you had somebody who was joining your team tomorrow, dream on, but let's say you were able to get.
I can always dream.
Let's say you were to get
this is
hypothetical
Henry,
person.
So it's
where would you suggest that person starts to get ready for tackling that OpenShift Administration 1 course?
OpenShift Administration 1. I agree with Nate that a smattering of core Linux knowledge would be a good thing. You don't need to be necessarily an expert or even a Linux system administrator, but certainly knowing your way around the file system, knowing just the essentials of how you work from the command line, I think would be a skill I would want somebody to have. And then just a little bit of knowledge of Docker and or Podman, although, well, actually you're going to pick that up in the course. So not necessarily much knowledge of that, but just conceptually a little bit of knowledge about how those things work, how network services work would be a good base level knowledge. But if you're coming in at the DO 180 level, we're going to sort of build your skill set from the ground up, I would say.
We'll hold your hand a little bit to
well, and I think one thing I'll add to that too is that a couple of years ago, maybe, we actually started making containers part of what we expected people who were earning the Red Hat certified system administrator credential and the sort of associated courseware that we had. We started making that something that we tried to get everybody to know, because we saw that as really the trend, that if you are working, if you're working in this space, this is something that's going to be core knowledge for you. But, I'm going to point out something else too. And I'm going to talk about my co-host because he's not here to defend himself. I'm here, every other week with Jafar, and I'm fascinated by how seldom he ever has to do anything on the command line to demonstrate a lot of the really interesting topics that he does. And so I think that, the OpenShift console has evolved quite a bit in the sense that there are a lot of things you can do now, and that maybe it is less command line driven. Is that a reasonable statement?
I could not agree more. Like, to watch the UI capabilities of this product grow over the last, let's just say since OpenShift 3, over the last 7 years, it's been pretty awesome to see everything you can do, especially once the platform is up and running. I think on the front end there might still be a little bit that you have to
to get it
to touch a lot less than there used to be. I mean, whoever remembers the many thousands of variables that were required in the Ansible playbooks to install version 3. But I actually love. It's harder to create content that focuses on the UI, because it's there's screenshots sometimes and they become static and they can easily get outdated. But I feel
All
like
it takes is one fix or enhancement for
Oh,
your screenshot to become
ab-
irrelevant.
absolutely. But it just does the product a disservice not to focus on how good the UI is now,
It
both for the developer
really has come
persona
along.
and the admin persona. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so speaking of that, I with a little bit of hesitation, but I will say that we actually are very close to releasing a new course and actually an accompanying exam that is going to be on containers and that is going to be very focused on developers. And that, and that's not quite yet out, but it's real soon. Nate,
Close.
can you tell us anything about that or?
Yeah, that as with both of these intro kind of 100 level courses, a little bit of introduction to containers, focused on Podman this time. Some talk of registries, networking, persistent data, still a thing, right?
Mhm.
Not everything is going to be stateless. Some troubleshooting, and then finishing up with some introduction to OpenShift and Kubernetes. So a little bit more focus on how to use containers and some of the accompanying tools as a developer, versus as an admin or the ops type persona, so to say.
Well, and I think that, there's been some evolution there too, where if we again rewind back to, where you were beginning to work with it around version 3,
Mm-hmm.
I think that if we, our understanding of how this would be actually used in the world was, I'd say almost incomplete in a sense, because it's okay. Well, so what is going to be the responsibility of the administrator? What's going to be the responsibility of the developer? And in general, I'd say in industry, there's been this convergence where it's not as clean a line as it once was. But at the same time, I'd say that around things like Kubernetes and containers, there is emerging a little bit of clarity about, look, building the container and what's in there and some of those things maybe are really more the developer focus at this point, with the administrator being more responsible for some of these things like, well, go figure, the infrastructure and the orchestration. Does that sound like approximately correct?
Oh man, I think there's been areas where the lines have been blurred, and there's areas where maybe there's a clearer line. I don't know which is which anymore. I remember I used to be a solution architect, so I would be visiting with customers selling this product back in the early days of OpenShift 3, and trying to get the stories. We were trying to figure out how to present this to the admin persona, and how they were evolving from the before times, the before containers times. And well, this will probably be your responsibility, but the developers will still do this. And then like those lines really started to blur more and more. I don't know that I could say that there's a clear line anymore, Randy. I think it just depends on the organization, the maturity of the organization, the type of customer. So maybe customers and companies that are very highly regulated, that have very strict separations between functions,
Mm-hmm.
they obey those, and others are just in a get things done state, and those lines don't exist as much anymore. So yeah, it gets
Oh,
blurred.
yeah. And I mean, if you think about it in the context of, DevOps, GitOps,
Mhm.
SecOps, anything that ends with, it starts with Git and ends with Ops.
Yeah.
It really is, less of a clear, here is what these guys know and do, here's what these folks know and do. But I think that this is one of the wonderful things about the OpenShift platform, is that it actually allows for the flexibility of those kinds of roles to emerge over time, and that it doesn't become this thing where there's this in fact, in a sense, it almost discourages a siloed organization in a sense, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Or
And
so I
the
like to believe.
yeah.
Well, so let me move on to the 200 level, where we offer the Red Hat OpenShift Administration 2, operating a production Kubernetes cluster course. And I'm going to add, we also offer a corresponding exam called the Red Hat Certified Specialist in OpenShift Administration. Okay, and this has really emerged as one of our most popular certifications for people to go after, which is, quite remarkable in that, historically our biggest ones have been those Linux focused ones, and they still are extremely popular. Congratulations to Mohammed Saeed for having earned RHCSA. But we're really seeing a lot of interest in OpenShift certification, and this is the one that we see that most interested. But let's first, before we get people sitting before the exam, let's talk a little bit about that OpenShift 2 course. Nate, what do we move into when we start getting into the OpenShift 2 level?
Yeah, so just like the 100 level, there's a split. We have one that's a little bit more platform admin focused, one that's more developer focused, which I guess we'll talk about in a second. But for the admin, for the platform focused one, you're going to move into things like cluster health, auth-n and auth-c, so authentication, authorization, a little bit more about networking and the SDN solution that we use inside of OpenShift. Then I think we finish up with like how does scheduling work inside of a cluster. So, if you have a larger cluster and you need certain types of workloads to land on certain types of nodes, for instance. And if I remember correctly, Randy, on that one, we end up talking about updating and upgrading clusters, which is used to be a huge pain point. And again, something else, just like the watching the evolution of the UI, the upgrade process is almost magical now compared to what it used to be. And it's not magic. It took a lot of work from the Red Hat engineering organization to get it to this point, of course. But
yeah,
it's awesome.
I think one of the keys here for that I'll just mention as an aside is that OpenShift has been this real focus for us for some years, and I think nothing illustrates how important OpenShift is in that our recently announced CEO Matt Hicks was actually one of the people who worked on the very, very earliest iterations of OpenShift, and so there's a certain logic to all of that we've had all this attention on this, and that this is a very important direction for Red Hat. Henry, thinking about this, sort of this second level, would you say that somebody who is certified at this level, we have an exam that corresponds to this, and the certification, the one I just mentioned, are they ready to actually do things in production?
Yes, I would say they would be. That is the focus of the exam. I think we've got a question here that asks is someone who attends the course ready for core production responsibilities, and I would say yes, they are. I don't know that you would want to turn them, depending on their level of experience. You might not want to turn them loose completely unguided, but they should be, and a lot of that would just center around, other sorts of knowledge and soft skills that just come with experience, not necessarily related to somebody's level of experience with OpenShift. But
right. Well, there's always something beyond technical capability,
right?
And we can certify technical capabilities. I'm not necessarily going to go out on a limb and try to certify judgment or
right, exactly. they might be able
playing
to
well with
apply.
others. They
might be able to apply that update, but whether or not they can make the decision as to when it's the right time to apply that update, right? So yes, somebody who sat the course and took the exam, I would be perfectly comfortable presenting them as someone who could be trusted to start managing a production cluster.
Well, actually, so one of our viewers, Hussein, is challenging us a little bit on this, and he's saying, "Well, look, I've done the 180 and 280s, and apologies to listeners. We are so in the bad habit of talking in code with these codes like DO280 and EX280, which what we're talking about here again is the OpenShift 1 and OpenShift 2 administration levels. And, Hussein is saying he's still not confident about what might be his next step. And so first of all, we do feel like you know an awful lot. If you have cleared that Red Hat Certified Specialist and OpenShift Administration exam, you are somebody who can work with this. Now, does that mean you know everything? And I'm going to go ahead and say no. Otherwise, the show would be today would be ending in 2 minutes, and it would be the level up half hour. But in fact, we're going to talk about some other things that you can move on to. And I think these other things that you move on to are sort of dependent on the particulars of how your organization actually uses OpenShift. But we'll get to those in a minute. Before we do, I want to talk a little bit about this other path that Nate alluded to, and that is one that's more developer focused. And specifically, we have a course that is entitled Red Hat OpenShift Development 2, Containerizing Applications. Okay. And so this, as the name suggests, DO288 is a more developer focused offering. And so Nate, maybe give us a little bit of background on what's covered in that and how it differs from the, why we're sort of forking now between admin and developer. Tell me how they differ.
Yeah, so when we were talking about the admin course, at the 200 level, that's kind of like if you think of a persona, think of the 100 level is the operator, the 200 level is the administrator, and then when we get to talk about the 300 level for the platform side, we get into the engineer or the SRE type persona maybe. So the split and the reason we started to fork these off with 280 and 288 for the platform and the developer path more specifically is it's focusing on what people do. So a quote unquote developer, I guess this is an imperfect word because there are developers that work exclusively on the platform and in operations and designing that piece, and there are developers that are building the higher level applications for the business. So take this in the generic spirit that it's intended when we say developer here, but we focus more on where we stopped in 188. So deploying and managing those applications on OpenShift versus just running a container on your laptop with Podman, for instance. We get a little bit into the sourced image functionality. So how do we take your source code and just build the container image for you and start running it on the platform? It's not magic. It's something that works pretty reliably. It's not very customizable, right? It's not going to be like a long pipeline with unit tests and integration tests and things like that. But we do focus more on getting those applications built and run on the platform itself, or designed to run on the platform versus just running an application or just building an application on your laptop. So think of it maybe as moving into the enterprise developer mindset versus the developer doing something on their laptop mindset.
All right. Well, yeah. So that provides a little clarity on the difference there. Putting aside, learning about, OpenShift in these different paths, Henry. What are your thoughts in terms of, the good practices in terms of getting ready for a Red Hat exam in general?
Oh, for a Red Hat exam in general, do as much as you can. So there was some mention of some resources earlier to start getting your toes wet with OpenShift. Leverage those would be a good starting point. Taking some of these courses that are under discussion and doing the labs, and you get if you have a learning subscription, you get a certain amount of access to online labs. I don't think I can emphasize enough the criticality of not just reading the materials, listening to the lectures from your instructor, and trying to understand as much as you can about how things fit together, but actually going in and working with the technology and making mistakes I used to be an instructor, and I used to tell my students that when you make a mistake, that's actually one of the best things you can do, because that's really how you learn, is trying to analyze where you made the mistake and what that caused, and how to get yourself out of it. That's where you really start to internalize some of that knowledge. So um, you know uh, uh, our courses are excellent preparation, but I think courses in conjunction with practice is one of the best things that you can do to prepare for any of our exams. Um, so the exams are hands-on, so that means the more hands-on you have, the more, I think, the more comfortable you're going to be
Yeah,
in the exam.
absolutely. Well, so I'm gonna pause us a bit on the OpenShift front and just speak a little bit more generally about preparation. And one of the things that I would want people to know is that, if you are able to do some training on this subject, and look, it's always possible to sort of, learn on one's own. It is challenging, and it is also maybe not always the most time efficient way to do it. And so, if you're going to pursue training, I want people to know that Red Hat offers a lot of different ways to train. You're able to train in an open enrollment classroom environment, for example. Now, nobody's going to be shocked to hear that we have run a lot fewer of those in the last 2 years on account of the pandemic than we have historically, but those are coming back. But in addition to those sort of in-person go to a place, we have self-paced offerings. Nate, do you want to talk a little bit about the different ways, the different kinds of self-paced that we have? Or not? Did we lose Nate?
Oh, so everything got jumbled there, Randy. It all came in.
Okay.
at
Well,
once.
I was just saying that we have some different self-paced ways to train, and I was asking if you might want to mention those, just in general. Like, for example, we have online courses.
Yeah,
We
sorry.
have video courses.
I think my internet's finally catching up now.
Okay, well, I'll finish the
Everything
thought,
was
then we'll continue on. So
Oh,
I've posted a link on ways to test, and we also have ways to train. And I guess what I would want people to know here before we move on in our discussion of uh, of OpenShift specifically is that, first of all, we have multiple ways to train. You have open enrollment courses. If you work for an organization that wants to bring us in and conduct private training, we can do that. We can do virtual training where you have an instructor, a live instructor, but people are virtual and remote. We have self-paced training. We have video courses. We have the Red Hat Learning subscription that lets you basically access all of our self-paced offerings. That's where I was going with this, is that we have a lot of different ways to consume training. Did I miss anything, Nate?
no, I think that actually is pretty comprehensive, and I think there's people that have been in this business for a while, whether you're on the delivery side or the receiving side. There's more and more desire to be able to do things how you want. Some people love the in-person thing with the instructor, and you have all the knowledge and experience that comes with them. And some people just want to sit down in their bubble and do their self-paced course and have their hands-on environment. And both of those are perfectly valid, and you get all of those options. Consuming the Red Hat training offerings.
Yep. And so similarly, Henry, we also offer some different ways to take exams. And again, we have a classroom exam where you enroll in an open enrollment session, or we can conduct it as a private session. We also have two different ways to take it individually. One of them is a testing center and one of them is remote. Maybe Henry, can you describe a little bit about the difference between the testing center and the remote exam?
Sure. I guess the primary difference is that in the case of the testing center exam, you're using hardware that we provide, and you're in a location where we've made sure the environment is properly configured for you to take an exam, and generally, it's going to be a quiet environment. No barking dogs, no children, running around screaming outside, those sorts of things. The alternate, and I would say one of our more popular ways to test here in the past couple of years has been our remote exam offering. And with remote exams, you take the exam on your hardware using a special a bit of magic. And again, it's as Nate would say, it's not really magic. It's just the result of a lot of hard work on the part of various people. But you download a live USB image, and you boot your personal laptop or desktop, whatever system you have at home or in your office or wherever you decide is an appropriate location to take your exam. You boot into this special environment, and it connects you to our online exam environment, in which you first talk with a proctor, and they verify that you are who you are. And then you get connected to a desktop that looks very, very similar to exactly what you would see if you were taking the exam in a classroom or in a testing station. In fact, it's about 99.999% identical. At that point, you're in a virtual environment. Of course, we're not running. If you're taking, for example, an OpenShift exam, we're not running OpenShift on your personal system at home, because very few of us, I think, have a personal system that would allow you to run a full-fledged OpenShift cluster. But you're working in a virtual environment, and it's fairly indistinguishable from working in any of our other exam modalities.
So it goes back to Nate's point, is that what is it that you actually want to do? What is going to be convenient for you? It might be that it's more convenient as a matter of your living circumstance to take the exam at a testing center where maybe your significant other isn't there in the house, your pets aren't in the house, your kids aren't in the house. Maybe your desk looks like my desk does most of the time. Being able to go somewhere else is convenient, but for a lot of people, maybe not doing that is also convenient. So, I wanted to cover a bit of those options. I would also mention that we have a Red Hat Academy program, which works through universities and colleges. And if you're somebody who is a university or college student, that might be an option for you. And then one last thing that I would mention is that we also find that a lot of people are interested in the Red Hat learning community, which is an online community where people who are undertaking some sort of learning journey with Red Hat can go and talk about things and get help from each other. And, there is a concept in the world called social learning, and it does seem to actually help people. And in fact, I was just looking at some numbers yesterday that suggest that people who do that actually seem to do a bit better with our certification exams. Pro tip. So we have getting back to sort of the nub of the matter, and that's OpenShift. We do have a question. Is there a course focusing on default capabilities like FSETID and their influence in the container? FSETID.
I don't even know.
Well,
what
the answer
that
can be
is,
no
so.
sometimes. But
the answer is
you know
I don't
what?
know for that one.
we'll take note on that. So let me go ahead and move us up to the 300 level in terms of our offerings here. And the way I would characterize this is that we move from the world of core production responsibilities now into where we start diverging a little bit into what do you need to know as a question of scale or automation or specialization. And so one of the first things I guess I would mention is that we have the Red Hat OpenShift Installation Lab, DO322. And the name is sort of self-explanatory, but let's delve into that a little bit.
Is that a tee up for me to talk about 322 a little bit?
It is indeed.
Yeah, so it's essentially what Randy was talking about. The installation of OpenShift got easier and easier over the years, especially when you go back to the beginnings of OpenShift 3. But this particular course gives you an opportunity to actually practice, focused a little bit more on UPI, so that was user provision infrastructure. Versus IPI. The whole idea around IPI in OpenShift 4 was run this command, answer a few questions, magic, with a lot of engineering behind it. But the reality is a lot of customers either could not or were not able to just do that. They needed it to be a little bit more like specific to their environment. So a course like this gives you that hands-on opportunity with with more of a UPI-based installation of OpenShift.
Okay. So let me pose a question. I mean, one of the things that I've observed over the years is that typically OpenShift is something that is, also an organization that very often gets into the OpenShift world usually gets a professional services engagement with Red Hat or one of our wonderful delivery partners. What is the what is the profile of the organizations that want to dig into this particular area of skill and need people on their team who have this specific kind of ability?
I don't know. It's a good question. I think a lot of the times for this type of answer, I would go back to maybe more of the type of customer that's in a more regulated type of business. For instance, it has very strict rules that they have to follow. They have to translate those requirements into installation options or design decisions that we can't take into account with a more basic installation or an installation through the UI going through console.redhat.com or one of the cloud providers directly with ROSA and ARO, for instance.
Yeah,
that would be where I would assume that that most of this would take place when it comes to having more of that level of engagement.
Well, Hussein highly recommends it, so we must be doing something right with that course. And Hussein, if you want to share any additional details on how you found this useful in the chat, we would appreciate it, and it might be enlightening for others as well.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Continuing with sort of this 300 level scale automation, specialization. We also have a course on managing virtual machines with Red Hat OpenShift virtualization. And this is actually, a bit of a shift in terms of our focus for virtualization. Nate, give us a little background on this one.
Yeah, this was a newer course. It's only been out for a few months now, and it was fairly ambitious to make. It's a little bit more self-contained as well. So we'll go from giving you some, maybe not incredibly in-depth explanation for everything, Kubernetes or OpenShift at the beginning, but you could actually go into this one and get a lot of the beginning information all the way through how to run OpenShift virtualization. But maybe to answer your more specific question, Randy, with Red Hat virtualization nearing its end of life over the next few years, this is the not replacement for that because it's not a replacement for Red Hat virtualization or VM or anything like that. But it does give you an opportunity to run your virtual machines on the same platform that you're running all of your container workloads. And this course will kind of take you from zero to hero. That's one of the architects on the team likes to describe some of these things and get you ready to actually run this OpenShift virtualization solution.
Yeah. So Henry, are we thinking we might at some point offer a certification on this rather specialized use?
Yes, we are, and that is currently in the planning stages. Actually, am hoping that might see the light of day by the end of this year. But we do have plans for an associated exam on the board, it's just waiting some attention from developers, which is always a challenge, right? To get developer hands on everything that we want to do. But
The list is long.
Yes, this is on the drawing board.
All right. Well, I hopefully we can get that done because I think this is actually a very interesting angle. But again, I see this as a specialization, right? This is not something that everybody who's operating OpenShift everywhere is necessarily going to be interested in or wanting to do this. But there is a set of use cases for which this is something that makes sense. Moving on, we also have another specialization, and that's enterprise Kubernetes storage with Red Hat OpenShift Data Foundation, aka DO370. Nate, that one probably also requires a little bit of explanation about what OpenShift Data Foundation is and why somebody would care.
And why we have such long titles with all of our product names for.
What I need to do is bring the brand team on as guests, and they might actually be able to explain some of that.
Yeah, and all the rules that go around it. So yeah, ODF is kind of the evolution of OpenShift container storage over the years. If I boil it down to something, for those that remember some of the earlier days, it started out with Gluster, and then Ceph got introduced, and this is built, as exclusively on Ceph at this point. But ODF gives us a storage option, a storage part of the OpenShift family of solutions. So you'll go through in this course learning about what ODF is and the architecture of it, for instance, to how we use it to how we configure applications to use both file and block storage provided by ODF. I think we cover some backup and restore capabilities in there. And if I remember correctly, we also cover object storage as well. So everyone that's familiar with S3 being the ubiquitous object storage solution, something similar that you get with compatible that you get with ODF. So you can run all of this in your environment, whether your environment's in your data center or in one of the public cloud environments.
Yeah, so alternately stated, basically, this is a storage as software solution that leverages OpenShift and Ceph, which of course Ceph is a storage as software solution in and of itself that can also be used independently of OpenShift. But this sort of combines the two, that if an organization is invested into OpenShift and has OpenShift skills and knowledge internally, it's sort of a convenient on-ramp, I guess would be one way to put it, to say, well, and here's a way to do software as storage or storage as software. I need another cold brew coffee. Storage is software.
Storage defined as software. We could throw a couple extra words in there too.
Yeah. I always get my terminology. See, because I'm trying to use the full phrase as opposed to using the acronym. But that's basically it, right? This is an OpenShift focused way of doing that and bringing that into your organization if OpenShift is something you're standardizing on, right?
And it's bringing that homogeneity across all of the different environments that you might be running OpenShift in, because like ideally you're running it in, maybe multiple cloud providers and maybe in some of your on-prem locations, maybe in some of your edge locations as well. And kind of creating that common, using that common technology across everything, minimizes learning curves for one. And then you'll see, I think we just actually announced ODF 4.11 the other day. So constantly evolving the capabilities of that as well. It's very hard to keep up with the changing products of
well, especially in the OpenShift space.
Yeah.
Well, Henry, do we have a certification associated with this? There's only one correct answer.
We indeed do. Yes. We have an associated exam that covers very much the same things that that Nate mentioned that the course covers, I think the word from folks who taken this exam is it's both very challenging and and pretty on the nose.
And I'm seeing actually that we're going to have a little talk with the web team about that particular link that says exam but links a course. So
yes.
Anyway, moving on. Other adventures at the 300 level. Then we have what I would say is perhaps our core 300 level offering, and whereas I look at the installation piece, the OpenShift virtualization piece, as specializations. I see the data foundation piece is potentially, it's somewhere between specialization and a little more broad in appeal for the reasons that Nate talked about. But I think for this next one, I see this as that really logical next step that we were being asked about earlier, is what is that logical next step? And if I didn't know anything about somebody's particulars of their organization, what they were doing, this is the one that I would probably point them to, and that's Red Hat OpenShift Administration 3. Go figure. The one that follows 2 would be the one that has 3 in the name. So Red Hat OpenShift Administration 3, scaling Kubernetes deployments in the enterprise. And so Nate, why don't we start getting into now with this one, the scaling deployments in the enterprise? What sort of subject matter do we cover, and what skills do people acquire?
Yeah, you think something like scaling, deployments in the enterprise? No, the names
going out on a limb.
So I mentioned a little while ago the different generic personas, from the more of like an operator to an administrator to getting into the engineering levels for all of these. And this is the first one, at least on the quote unquote admin path, that would be more of the engineer level, I would say. So getting into a little bit more of what you learn in here, being able to leverage for the overall design and some of the more complex scalable tasks that you might need to do. So automating those tasks, in this version using Ansible, getting into more explanation and details around operators. So not everyone is familiar or comfortable or knows anything about operators in some cases. So this will get you exposed to those a bit. We covered.
It's a very critical part and a feature and advantage of using OpenShift.
Huge part. I used to do internal enablement and travel to places in the before days to teach people this type of stuff. And I can't remember the very generic way I described these before, but it was, an operator's just a pod that does something in a reliable, repeatable, and observable way. So it's taking that reliable human and putting them in the in the pod and just having them kind of observe, analyze, and act over and over again. Obviously, significantly more complex than that, but getting you exposed to those. Talking more about enterprise authentication. So we talked about authorization and authentication in 280, but we're going to expand on that and make it more from more of an enterprise angle. Cluster logging, we start to cover in this one, and then just some general monitoring and troubleshooting as well. So again, leveling you up to with the skills you might need to make more informed design decisions and operating more complex environments.
See, I saw what you just did. Leveling up. I like that.
Hey,
Okay,
wasn't
and
even intended. Happy coincidence.
it slipped out. It slipped out. And so, Henry, again, do we have a cert on this?
We do indeed.
And you know, if I'm not mistaken, I believe you were just telling me within the last week or so that, without getting into specific numbers, that we've actually had a fair bit of uptake on this.
Yes, we have for one of our upper level certification exams. I think we've had a very healthy uptake. For an advanced technology, and getting back to the question earlier about would somebody who has come out of EX280 or DO280, EX280, the Openshift Administration 2 track, would they be qualified to work on a production cluster? And I said yes, with some qualifications. I think the DO380, EX380 is sort of the second half of the core knowledge you would need to be even more effective as a cluster administrator, or even as a advanced DevOps type person. Again, where sometimes it's hard to blur the line between. It's hard to come up with a line between what's the responsibility of the developer, what's the responsibility of the administrator. So, I think some of these advanced courses would even be appropriate for somebody who views their role as more of a developer. But you have you also have the responsibility of managing the cluster. Yeah. But yes, we do have an exam, and it covers much of what is covered in the course. And
all right. Well, so I'm going to move us forward here. Thank you, Henry, to the 400 level, because we're closing in on the end here, and I do want to talk about sort of the 400 level, where I describe this possibly not entirely accurately, but I describe it as the OpenShift Plus level. And the reason why is because, of course, we do actually sell something called OpenShift Container Platform Plus, which incorporates some OpenShift add-ons that you can get individually, but probably the best option, the one that I think most organizations go for, is to get that plus. And here I'm talking about three particular things. I'm talking about ACM, Advanced Cluster Management, ACS, Advanced Cluster Security, and Quay. And so we have a course called DO480, and the DO480 is Red Hat, let's see, where is it?
Multi-cluster management.
Multi-cluster management,
yeah,
with Red Hat OpenShift Platform Plus. And again, some of these technologies can actually be acquired separately, but the organizations that are getting into it at this level of depth, they find it, they generally need all of them anyway, and it's a pretty good package. So Nate, just at a high level, what are the kinds of things that we are starting to get into here, as the name suggests, with ACM, ACS, and of course the mysteriously named Quay.
Or Key, depending on who's
Key,
listening.
if you know Commonwealth English, but everybody calls it Quay.
That's because the guy that wrote it called it Quay. So it's just like GIF versus GIF, right? What's right, what's wrong? No, this is where we start getting into more of the solutions, right? This isn't necessarily product training. It's not going down, 100 miles in one product, but we cover 4 here at minimum. OpenShift itself, obviously, we go heavily into how to use ACM to manage multiple clusters, possibly across multiple providers, on-prem, cloud. Doesn't really matter. That's kind of one of the desires and promises behind the open hybrid cloud approach. Quay for your container image registry for, again, maybe like those regulated environments that can't or won't leverage Quay IO, for instance. And then ACS, which is one of the newer acquisitions. I think it was just last summer or last spring when Red Hat acquired StackRox, and that became ACS. But that gets into the beginnings of the whole DevSecOps and shift left discussion with this course. But again, none of these going 100 miles deep. We'd love to hear from people about what they want with these. Do they want more ACM, or do they want more ACS? Because these are complex. The full usage of those products can be very complex.
It can always get deeper. It can always get deeper. That seems to be the story. Well, that's in general the story with tech, but it's the story with OpenShift more than really anything else that Red Hat has had that I can think of, is that just when you think you were getting to the bottom of the well just gets deeper and deeper.
Yep.
So I think this is again, there's to the question asked earlier, there is so much more to that one can learn. Don't underestimate your skills and knowledge if you're somebody who has gone through that OpenShift admin 2 or OpenShift developer 2 level. You are somebody who has skills that are absolutely valuable in the market. Just understand that it goes so much wider and so much deeper, and I think we offer a lot. So just to close us out before one last announcement, I would say there's also some things there's some technologies that are what I'd call OpenShift adjacent, that we offer some training and certification on. And maybe if we could just mention a couple of those quickly in passing, Nate.
Yeah, we captured a few of them that I thought would be interesting to call out. So I'll actually read the course names since they're long and I don't remember them all by heart.
Exactly
Building resilient microservices with Istio and Red Hat Service Mesh, OpenShift Service Mesh. So as that name implies, it's a course that kind of teaches you one of the layered products that runs on top of OpenShift, which is OpenShift Service Mesh, which is based on a few different upstream projects, including Istio, and I think we still include Jaeger and those pieces in there for tracing. What was the other one? So Red Hat Cloud Native Microservices development with Quarkus. You guys have awesome OpenShift clusters. You're a wizard at running them and designing them and operating them, but you still need to be able to run things on them. So these are the courses that will help get your developers ready to start writing applications, microservices applications, or otherwise, and using Quarkus for running them. We have a course on AMQ streams, which is based on Apache Kafka, so developing EDA, event-driven applications and streams. And then lastly, the one we called out, just released a couple weeks ago, was developing applications with OpenShift serverless and Knative. So we cover serving, eventing, and functions from Knative. So spoiler, they're still servers. The promise was not met, but it's a
worst name ever.
Course. Yeah, it's a shorter course, so it's easier to consume. But if you've done anything in the for event-driven applications, or if you've ever done anything with functions in general, using like Lambda,
AWS Lambda,
Yep. It's anyone who's it's a pretty quick and an interesting course to go through if you want to get some exposure to serverless.
Yeah, just to kind of tie a concept together, we talked about operators, for example. Well, guess what? Serverless it's not the only way you can do it, but in fact, there is a serverless operator within OpenShift, along with a bazillion other operators that one could potentially use or leverage. And so I'll just mention very quickly without quizzing Henry, because in fact, his quarter of the portfolio doesn't generally cover these. We have, for the first three of these that Nate mentioned, we also do have certifications available. So we really are trying to train and certify not only across all of OpenShift, but these other things that are very closely tied into them and that make you able to do even more. So with that, first of all, thank you very much, Nate and Henry, for joining today. Nate at the end of your day, Henry probably 2 or 3 hours before the start of your day. And I really appreciate your coming out. And then, one other thing that I'm going to announce is that this is, in fact, our second to the last episode of the Level Up Hour. We have, this is our 68th episode, if memory serves, and we have covered a lot of ground. All of our sessions have been, dutifully archived and available on the web, at your convenience. And I'd say there's a lot of topics and subject area that you might want to go back and explore and subscribe to and dig into, because you could spend a lot of time looking at this stuff. And so I would say, first of all, just because this is the second to last episode, you are not off the hook for liking, subscribing, and sharing, because that content will still be out there. And then I'll also say, in a couple of weeks, we will have our final episode, and it'll be a very special episode with special guests, where we will look back at some of those interesting episodes, talk about what's coming in the future, and have a really, I think, very enjoyable last hurrah on the Level Up Hour. And of course, I'll add to that Red Hat will continue to put a lot of content regarding OpenShift. We will continue to offer live streams. We've just come to a convenient stopping place for this one. So please do like, subscribe, and share, and do join us in 2 weeks when we have a really special last show. So with that, thanks again, gentlemen, and thank you for attending the Level Up Hour. Bye, everyone.